All right, what can we do with this? We got to apply the quotient rule here. Quotient rule says take the derivative of the numerator first. The 3 just hangs out. Derivative of sine is cosine. So I'm going to get 3 cosine of x. And then I have to multiply that by the denominator, parentheses 1 plus cosine of x. And then subtract, right? And then the derivative of the denominator. Okay, denominator. Well, the derivative of 1 is 0, so that's negligible. Derivative of cosine is negative sign, so I'm going to put a parentheses here and put a negative sign. All right, careful accounting of our work with parentheses, and multiply that by the numerator. 3 sine of x. Okay, so I have derivative of the top times the bottom minus the derivative of the bottom times the top, and all of that is over the denominator squared. 1 plus cosine of x, and we're going to square that sucker. And to square that means you got to multiply it by itself. So I'm going to hold off on that. I don't like that idea right now, but I am going to clean up the top. So what can I do in the top? Well, I'm subtracting a negative, so let's fix that. And then I have to distribute this 3 cosine in here. And then here, this is just a multiplication. All right, so what's that look like? That, we're going to have 3 cosine times 1, which is just 3 cosine of x. And then we'll have 3 cosine times cosine, so that's going to be a plus 3 cosine squared of x. And then we have a plus here, sine times sine with the 3 hanging out. So that would be 3 sine squared of x, all divided by 1 plus cosine of x in parentheses. That's an x right there, squared. And, oh, this is lovely. Ooh, right here. I'm going to strike that out. I have 3 cosine x plus 3 sine of x. If you factor the 3 out of that, then you get cosine squared plus sine squared, which is 1 times 3. So that highlighted part becomes 3. So now I have 3 cosine of x that was just chilling out front. And then that highlighted part is just a 3. Ooh, this gets cuter. So I wonder if that original function, I could apply identity and clean it up, I bet. I'm going to try that in a minute. If I factor the 3 out of the numerator, then that right there becomes 3 times cosine of x plus 1, which is going to cancel with 1 of the 1 plus cosine of x in the bottom, right? Because it doesn't matter the order we add. So let's say this right here is going to cancel with 1 of those, so I no longer have a square there. So it looks like I get 3 over 1 plus cosine of x is the final result there. Wow, that cleaned up quite a lot. All right, so now I'm curious, if I did a little algebra of this, would I have an easier function? So I'm going to apply a little algebra of this. So I'm going to show you a little algebraic trick on that. Send a new page. So I've got 3 sine of x. How do I know that derivative is right, by the way? I can check that in a minute. First, I'm going to see if I can do a little algebraic jiggery pokery on this sucker. What I'm going to do is multiply by the conjugate of 1 plus cosine, which is 1 minus cosine of x. And I have to do the same thing on the top. And the reason I'm doing that is if I take 1 plus cosine times 1 minus cosine, then I get the middle terms cancel, and I get 1 minus cosine squared of x in the bottom. And maybe you recognize that, maybe you don't. If you don't recognize it, I will show you. This is my numerator, which looks more complicated at the moment. 1 minus cosine of x in the top. Think about the Pythagorean identity, sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x equals 1. If we subtract the cosine to the other side, then we get the sine squared of x equals 1 minus the cosine squared, which is my denominator. So this right here is really the sine squared of x. X. And the sine in the numerator cancels with one of those, but I don't think this makes my life any better, does it? So my new version of the original blue function here is now 3 times 1 minus cosine of x over the sine of x. Yeah, I guess that doesn't make life easier. The only other thing I can do there is distribute the 3 and the sine and say this is 3 over the sine of x minus 3 cosine of x over the sine of x. And 1 over sine is cosecant, so that would be 3 cosecant of x. And cosine over sine is cotangent, minus 3 cotangent of x. Oops, cotangent of x. Well, at least I don't have a quotient there, but I had a shitload of work to get there. Eek. So an alternative derivative would be the derivative of that. So just for fun, the derivative of that, derivative of cosecant, we established yesterday, is negative cosecant times the cotangent. The 3 is hanging out, so negative 3 cosecant of x, cotangent of x. Derivative of the cotangent is the negative c cosecant squared. So negative times a negative is a positive. 3 derivative of cotangent is cosecant squared. Yeah. And that right there should be equivalent graphically to this right here, remarkably. Let's check that out. All right, so anyway, what's the moral of the story? I had to apply the quotient rule here. I tried to apply a little algebra, hoping I didn't have to apply the quotient rule. It was a ton of messy algebra, so that really didn't make my life any better. You don't know till you try. Boom, done.